Hey, it's Pete Damien Marshall, and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast. Get down.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all-ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending.
We want to announce that Ragged Records and Trash Can Annie are combining with Alternating Currents for a joint sidewalk sale and live music show on Saturday, August 19th. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., they'll have a sidewalk sale with LPs, CDs, and vintage clothing. And from 6 to 8 p.m. at that evening at the Davenport location, both of these are at the Davenport location, they'll have live music from the Dendrons from Chicago, Illinois, and Running Man from the Quad Cities.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with Running Man, Skip Greer, lead singer of the Dead Kennedys, is also the lead singer of Running Man. Tonight's guest is
Pete Damien Marshall, former guitarist of Samhain.
Yeah, punk rock icon. Let's get to that interview.
All right, good night.
Good night. Pete, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Pete, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, great to be here.
So exciting. So we've been doing this podcast for a long time, and from time to time we get requests about what artists that we should bring on, and we've had numerous requests to have you on the podcast. So we finally got you, so the people that have been asking for you, they're going to get it once and for all. So we're excited. We're really excited. So before we get into Samhain stuff and everything else outside of that, we'd like to discuss, your origins before your time in punk rock and music and guitar. Where did it all start for you?
I think I've said this before. It was I have a musical family.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a amateur big band vocalist, and he liked like things like Robert Shaw Chorale, singing like that, and sea shanties and big band music. Willingly or not, I was fed a steady diet of 50s Broadway musical stuff, Scottish records, stuff from a different generation, really.
Yes.
I think my first performance was age 3 when we drove to my dad's mother had moved to Pinellas Park, Florida to retire, and his older sister Jean lived down the street, a couple of houses down, So apparently my first public performance was me standing on a kitchen chair singing "Every Day is Ladies' Day" with me. Well, that turns into something else too, because I remember getting in arguments with my parents. But you wanted to do everything. It was like, well, school beats it out of you.
Yeah.
And having you not letting me play guitar isn't helping either. First thing, rock and roll wise, I think a year after that, Gimme Shelter had come out. It was on Channel 13 here in New York, which is the public TV station. Mm-hmm. The dictator's line in "I'm never going to watch Channel 13." in what is that? Two Tub Man. So that that's a local reference. But they showed Gimme Danger. No, not Gimme Danger. Gimme Shelter. And I saw Keith Richards staggering around with that clear Dan Armstrong guitar, mm-hmm. and the haircut and the snakeskin boots, and I was like, I want to do that. I think I was 8. And then my mother decided that she wanted to learn how to play guitar at adult school at night, and I wasn't allowed to touch the thing. And after that, it was just like, I think I found a cut up, a disassembled Hagstrom guitar, electric, in garbage at a local hippie house when I was like 9 or 10. And I brought that home and screwed it together and pretended to play it and didn't know anything about how to put it together. But I think that thing ended up getting used in the early 80s by somebody else, and then it got smashed. But that's the origins of it. And then, of course, it was they wanted me to. My parents wanted me to play horns. Mm-hmm. They got me started on trombone, and I wasn't into it. I wasn't very good. I was slow at reading music. I was in band, but I was like third chair, I think. Mm-hmm. And eventually, I think for my 16th birthday, I got a combined Christmas and birthday gift of a $68 Hondo 2 Les Paul plywood piece of crap. And man, I never heard the end of that. It was just like, oh, what a waste of money. We're really wasting. You're going to waste your time doing this? Oh my God. Don't you want to play? Don't you want to do anything? And I was into photography, and being the mediocre / horrible student I was, the school, between the school and my parents, are like, wow, this might be a good idea for him. And then as soon as the guitar came along, that was thrown away. I still did it, but I wasn't as into it.
Yeah, very good.
Well, once you got a little bit further along in your playing, what do you remember? What your first major guitar was that you bought yourself?
Let's see. I had that Hondo. We got rid of that. I'm blanking on what I got next. Oh, a Fender. It was a Fender Lead 1, because even back then I loved Les Paul Juniors with the one pickup, and the Lead 1 kind of looked like that. And there were no Les Paul Juniors available. I mean, they were in Michigan. They would be all over the place at yard sales, but New Jersey, no.
Very good. So let's talk a little bit more about your pre-days before your entrance into Samhain. Were you a punk rock kid growing up? Or was that something that you kind of grew into? Or because you had talked about a little bit about your influence of Keith Richards on you, so can you kind of give us a little bit more of a synopsis on that?
Every every punker has Rolling Stones records.
Yeah,
Sure.
They have to. I mean, you can probably go to anybody's house and pull out a copy of Get Your Yayas Out and, Sticky Fingers, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as soon as there was, I remember, like, we'd always watch the CBS News after dinner, and there was like this new phenomenon from England, punk rock, rah, rah, rah. And there was Steve Jones with the white Les Paul.
yeah.
And then I was like, I'm doing that. I knew immediately that I would be good at that. I traded the lead one for one of the kids in school had an SG, and he had just seen the Outlaws and wanted a Fender.
Mm.
And one of my other friends was like, take that SG and run out of here before he changes his mind. Because truth be told, that lead one was kind of a dud. That was a real bad era for Fender.
Mm.
So I had that. And yeah, I started, I think the Pistols album, the Ramones record came out in 76. I really didn't see any difference because I remember buying the Ramones record and the Who Live at Leeds on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically how I really taught myself guitar, those two records.
Great albums to learn to.
Well, yeah, and you can turn down, if you want to play bass, you can turn down, the bass channel because they're mixed hard left and right.
Mm.
Both of them. And, I still listen to them to this day. I think I have more copies of Live at Leeds than I do of any other record. I think I have 5 in all its itinerations and
expanded tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, let's get right into it. You joined Samhain shortly before the Initium album was released. Can you give our listeners an insight into your journey into the band?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to go back a ways to like 1981, and I had a band with my friends that it was a year average, guitar, drums, bass, and local crazy guy on vocals. And that was called Humpty Keg, named after a beer can that had a crocheted cover on it. And, we used to go, everybody pile into a car and go to shows in Manhattan. Nobody liked us. But after that, we actually played. The other 3 guys in the band were a little bit younger than me, so we played one. And I guess they were in 11th grade or so, and we played a Battle of the Bands up in Vernon, New Jersey, which was where they all lived, and we lived in the summer. We had a summer house in Highland Lakes. So we played this Battle of the Bands, and they actually called the cops. I had borrowed every Fender Twin I could find, along with my own Pro Reverb. So I had 4 of them hooked together. And just blasting away. And then, they turned the PA off. The cops showed up, and then from then on, we were marked.
Yeah.
After that, we did a couple of, I played with kids or people in Rutherford, and, cut my teeth that way. And then, I worked in a record store, and I went to Bergen Community College, which is, it's a 2-year county school.
Sure. I
spent 3 years there. 2 years school.
Yeah.
It just that kind of like mass education, I couldn't, most of it I couldn't get a handle on. So it was just more of a place to hang out, and I was a lifeguard at the pool.
Mm.
And so it was like a work study environment.
Mm-hmm.
But one day I was in the cafeteria, and I saw this little dude come in with a mohawk and a cane, and it was Bobby Snots, who was the singer of the Whore Lords.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I knew who he was because in high school we had this, I think my friend Jim Wallerstein, who was in Das Damen, had this book. It had a red cover. I forget what it's called, but it had a picture of Bobby in it, like making a muscle. And he had a tattoo on his shoulder that was a skull wearing like a Marine's helmet, and it said Missy. And, of course, with a cigarette dangling out of his mouth. So I'd love to see that book again if anybody knows what it is or, where I could get it. Yeah, there was also pictures of Howie Pyro setting fire to John Xavier's hair in the entrance to the Palace Hotel next to CB's to give him a punk haircut.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway, it's like I just marched right up to Bobby. I'm like, hey, I know who you are. And he was like, oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, come on down to Blue Moon Studios. We're doing Oh, he was in my psychology class, too. Of course. Asking all the questions, ex-con. So anyway, I went to the show, and the band was terrible. They'd been fairly good before. They had a guitar player named Tarek Saber, who's now a very good friend of mine. It was just bad. So Bobby ends up kicking the guitar player in the nuts at the end of the show, and then comes out in the audience and goes, "You're the guitar player now."
That's awesome.
And I was like, hamana. So that was my entrance into that. And also, at the same time, at Burden Community, Steve Zing was a student there.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in a TV production class together. So that's where I met him. And eventually, I think that the Whore Lords thing might have lasted 18 months. And it never, ever, that band never, ever lasted. Because it was always two junkies and two kids.
Yeah.
Nobody had any money. I mean, we did one recording. I paid for it.
Yeah.
So I kept the master, which may or may not come out anytime sooner or later. That's probably back burner at this point, but it's in the hands of Generation Records,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
which is a good store in New York. So the last, we did this for 12 or 18 months. And at the very last show at CB's that we play, the matinee, Bobby says, "We're not the Whore Lords anymore. We're called Nazi Youth." And all the rest of us were just my friends at that point. We're like, we quit.
Yeah.
So then I joined Morning Noise as their guitar player. They just threw him. I forget whether they threw him out or he quit. So I did that for a while, and then Steve started playing with Glenn, and at his house and making demos, and they were flying Lyle Presler up from DC
Mm-hmm.
to do guitar, to, rehearse with them. But they made the record at Real Platinum, which is a studio that Morning Noise, we worked at, and it had become a 24-track studio after it was quarter-inch half-inch 8-track. They did the sessions there, and then they played the first Sam Hain show with Lyle, and he's wearing a Georgetown shirt or something, a sweatshirt on stage with white sneakers, and everybody else looked like they did. I remember Brian Baker being a complete dick to me that night, And that, Lyle they drove Lyle back to the airport, and that was it. Or maybe Lyle and Brian drove up, I don't remember. So then, I guess Glenn doesn't like to audition, have like these open audition things. So he's talking to Steve, like, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, let's just use Pete for right now, I guess. And, it stuck. I had to change my entire style and playing. And Glenn hated my SG because it was brown. Didn't matter what it sounded like. He hated it.
Yeah.
So gradually I was worked in, and then we started touring. Yeah, there was no money in that. Actually, sometimes we did a lot better than Glenn claims than the Misfits did, money-wise. And the shows were bigger, apparently.
Very good. Well, let's get right into it. 1986, Samhain released November Coming Fire. That album is still kind of regarded as a punk classic. There's no doubt about it. Can you talk a little bit more about the creation of that album and your involvement in it?
Yeah. Well, first I'm going to say, like, the Unholy Passion EP was also recorded. We did everything at Real Platinum because it was in Lodi.
Right.
We did that one, and I think I was using like a DoD Overdrive 250 into my Pro Reverb to record the guitar parts. And then my younger sister, who was in college, and a fur model at Bloomingdale's, loaned me $500, and I bought a Marshall and a 412. So that's how much of a loser I was right there. No money, living at home. But yeah, we did that record. That was Unholy Passion was a very intense recording session. And then after that, I think Steve quit after that. So then we found London. Mm-hmm. Oh, we didn't find him. He was always around. He would take the train up from Baltimore, and while I was at work or whatever I was doing, my dad would go pick him up at Newark Penn Station, and he'd bring him home. And he stayed at our house most of the time. And it was like, I just remember my father being like, "What do you want to eat?" And Glenn's like, "I'm a vegetarian." And my father would make him a huge salad. Then, recording. That was the November Coming Fire. It was. I don't remember having many problems with that, but I apparently in a conversation with Erie, I forgot how many tracks that Glenn played drums on, which is like 5 or 6, I think, and I could only remember Human Pony Girl.
Before you go on, so I've read many different articles about the recording of the Unholy Passion album, about how the guitar parts were re-recorded. Some of your parts were in it, some parts you weren't in it. What is the story behind that?
When they got the deal with Caroline, well, they threw me out, not they, Rick Rubin. And then London was the next to go, and then I guess Glenn got a deal with Caroline to redo some of the Misfits stuff and all the Samhain stuff. Mm-hmm. So London had heard him talking about that, and then he called. Glenn said something like, "I'm not getting any money out of this," or whatever, which was not right. And so he called. I forget what the jacket company was. They were in Canada, and they had ordered 25,000 of November Coming Fire. So, of course, we were arguing with him about money, and that was the first thing. So the first thing he does is he claims that he re-recorded all my tracks, which I don't think is possible or actually he didn't know what I did on some of that stuff. So, he claims one thing. I've heard some stuff and think like, yeah, but Glenn had tracks on there anyway.
Sure.
Because nobody was ever as good as he was. I don't really, I have been getting in arguments with him during the recording of that. Like, I thought we should sound more like Slayer. And he didn't want to do that yet. Or a more, like hard rock direction.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had changed my entire style around to fit what he was doing or what he wanted, which is more like birthday party kind of night out and stuff. And it was, the guitar parts were weird. And I knew what he was going for, but then again, I missed out on years of development as as your, like average rock clown. But I didn't really like average rock guitar playing anyway. Yeah. Until, I changed my style back later on. But yeah, that was the November Coming Fire was the Marshall, and I think both of the Icemen I had.
Very good. After you left Samhain, you went on to play with many different bands, one namely Iggy Pop. Can you give our listeners how the Iggy Pop opportunity came your way?
Yeah, I work at probably largest musical instrument rental company in the company, Studio Instrument Rentals. Mm-hmm. And I just work on all the gear and troubleshooting and fixing things and
that's cool.
Stuff like that. So we had rehearsal studios in that building, and Iggy had come in to do. I remember I don't know what he was. It was only for a couple of days, but I had to go in the room and fix a couple of things, and I, like got to thank him for getting me on the road to doing all this, because the Stooges were and are my favorite band. So they went out and did whatever, and then came back and were rehearsing again around the time of the American Caesar record. And I did a couple of the pre-tour shows with them as the guitar tech.
Oh, nice.
One of them was Iggy had decided. Well, he was working with these three guys. The band was Eric Schermerhorn on guitar, Hal Cragen playing bass, and Larry Mullins was the drummer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So Eric and Hal could be snobs, and a lot of the time, like, acted like they, well, especially Eric, above this kind of music. But they're still drawing a paycheck on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at that point, I guess it was too smooth for Jim, Iggy. So he decides to get his ex-guitar player Whitey Kirst back to play with Eric to, like, just stir it up a bit. And and Whitey was always he was whiskey stained shirts and just a rock guy.
Yeah.
So Eric is completely up in arms about this, and it is like trying to get me to, like, sabotage his rig during this show in LA we were doing, which is Rock for Choice at the Hollywood Palladium, and I was the guitar tech. Now, mind you, Eric has borrowed two of my Marshall heads that I had at this time because he didn't have any older ones like I did. He's using my Les Paul Jr. along with his, and he wants me to sabotage Whitey somehow. So that doesn't happen. And on the plane on the way back to New York, he gives Jim an ultimatum, and says, if you don't get rid of Whitey, then I'm going to quit. And you don't do that with Iggy.
No.
So, and Jim was like, okay, quit. And he did. And then Jim was talking with his manager, who at the time was Art Collins, and he's like, well, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? I need another guitar player. Like, Whitey's a little too out of control to be by himself right now. So Art said, well, Pete plays guitar. Jim was like, oh, yeah, I forgot. And then he calls me calls the shop at work one day, and I hear over the PA in the shop, like, Pete Marshall, Iggy Pop's on line 2 for you. And everything stopped.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then he's like, you think you can help me out? And a week later, I had to, get a rush passport, and we were in France.
Oh, cool.
Playing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got the next question?
Well, I just recently discovered, because Iggy's got a lot of albums, so it's hard to necessarily listen to them all. But Beat 'Em Up with the incarnation, you guys called yourselves the Trolls. Can talk about more?
We
about
didn't. He did.
He did. Okay.
Yeah.
That album is really good. Can you talk more about the creation of that one?
Yeah, I was. I still worked no matter what I did with him. I still worked at SIR, and when I asked my boss, like, they want me to go down to Miami and record this thing for like 3 weeks, and I think there was a lot of jealousy there at that point because he had never made it. He ended up as the general manager of the place. Yeah. And, he's like, well, if you do that, then, we're not going to hire you back, which they pulled a couple of times, but they always did. So I went to Miami for like 4 days, I think, and just played through everything, and then they picked and chose what they wanted. And, it was the usual nuttiness of like Whitey insisting on one thing, and I think they actually processed his guitar sounds through Pro Tools, or just used a sample of something that sounded fuller than what he was providing. Because I remember I pulled out one of my Marshalls and set it up, and the engineer was like, finally, a great guitar tone. There was that, so I just powered through everything and then went home. But, I'm on there.
That was so cool.
Yeah, it's a great record.
Well, in 1995, you auditioned for the Murder Junkies, Merle Allen's band, Gigi Allen's old band. Can you talk about that venture? How'd that all work out?
I forgot who told me they needed a guitar player, but I went to Merle's apartment and hung out with him, and he gave me some songs to learn. And then since we had rehearsal studios, I said, well, why don't you come to me? This will be easier. And of course, that was, well, I forget who the singer was. I don't remember. Yeah, Merle showed up, didn't even tune up. And then Dino, the drummer, was naked.
Yes.
So the rehearsal tech walks in. He's like, hey, Pete, oh, God. And, we played for a while, and it was just, to me, it was more of, it seemed like, okay, this is more of an idea than an actual manifesto that they're going off. And it's like, and I'm thinking, like, how am I going to put up with these guys? The bass player didn't even tune up. and he's wearing an army helmet that has used tampons taped to it. So it's like I thought about it, and it was too weird, and I didn't feel like there was and they were just pushing an idea, but there was really nothing to back it up at that point.
Yeah.
So it was like a tribute band.
Exactly.
And it's like the singer's like, is he gonna do anything crazy? Put a drumstick up his ass.
I was going to ask you that, but you already answered the question.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't like these guys. And it was kind of depressing, actually. Yeah. It's like they're working hard to be so crazy. And it's like, I mean, between Bobby Snots from the Whore Lords, and I knew Gigi too, but I knew real crazy singers, and I always wanted to have a band with, basically where at the end of the show you'd get arrested, because that's the kind of bands I liked. That was what I wanted, but it was just like they were trying too hard or something. I mean, people enjoy it, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So
fair enough. Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, I mean, so what have you been working on lately? Are you still a part of playing music, or how's it work for you?
I was, and then like during the pandemic, my anxiety got really ramped up, and I just. I couldn't deal with playing with. I just wanted to stay home.
Yeah.
I was playing with Keith Roth, who's he's a DJ on Sirius. I think he does Ozzy's Boneyard. Mm-hmm. In one of his bands, Frankenstein 3000, and then a lot of like Monster Magna affiliated people, and they were doing this cover band they wanted me in, and I just couldn't do it. It was everybody else is a freelancer, and I was at that point I was working with two other guys to just make sure that SIR wasn't going to go under. Yeah. So I don't even play guitar much anyway. I work on them more than I play them.
Well, as we're talking about guitars, let's talk about your gear. Do you own a number of guitars, or is your ownership of guitars pretty minimal, or where are you at?
No, I think I have 32.
Oh wow,
yeah,
that's not that much. Rick Nielsen is there. There's a sound guy in New York too, Night Bob, who used to mix Aerosmith, and he wheels and deals stuff and has probably hundreds. So 32 is not much in the the grand scheme of things there.
But 31 more than I am.
Yeah, but you can't compare Rick Nielsen. He's an anomaly. You know what I mean? As far as guitar collectors go. I mean, I heard a while back that he was trying to get rid of some of the guitars that he actually had, and it was still a ridiculous amount after he got rid of some.
Yeah, it's like, well, he was one of the first people to like guitar dealer stuff. Well, not even that. It was just like he collected things since he was a kid, and started there, and then collected all Les Pauls and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get on to the next question here. Is that out of all the bands that you've been a part of, outside of Samhain and Iggy, what bands do you feel like that you were so close of making it and it just didn't happen? No, you were in Brain Eaters and Ditch Witch, etc. But were there any of those bands that you feel like were on the cusp of making it that just for some reason it just didn't work out?
No. Never,
huh?
I knew, just like Iggy will tell you about like the raw power era of the Stooges, and like he knew that record wouldn't sell. He knew he was crazy. And I knew, like, I did what I wanted to do, which was like Ditch Witch was great. I knew that we could touch people because, like, there's a couple of pictures of us playing the Brighton Bar down in Long Branch, New Jersey. I don't want to chalk it up to there was a halfway house for mental patients in the neighborhood, but you can see the people in the audience going crazy. And there was somebody that would be throwing stuff, and we were like, in your face, kind of dealing with mental illness and shooting too much coke. That's all the songs were. Violence, shooting too much coke, hallucinations, that kind of stuff.
Fair enough.
We did reach people, but it never would have worked.
Yeah, fair enough.
On a professional level, that's a 1 in a million chance.
In your bio to us, you had mentioned 70s, 80s Kawasaki motorcycles. Do you own one, or do you own a couple? What do you?
I do not.
Okay.
I would like to. I've always liked Kawasaki's. I was gifted a Honda 454 when I was like 19, and that ended up going to motorcycle salvage. But I wish I had that now.
Yeah.
But just the design aspect of the Kawasaki's and the way that the company went big, and they're just the way the bikes looked, that got me. And they were bulletproof, along with like the Suzuki GS series.
Yeah. I know in high school I always loved, like, was it the KZ1000 or they had a KZ600 or 900?
Yeah. Yeah, that little tailpiece gets me.
Yeah.
And then all the bikes in Mad Max were KZ1000s.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find there's a couple of stories online about that. They took the baffles out of all the exhausts, and you could hear them coming from miles away. They got 10 bikes from a dealership in Sydney, I think, and came back with 7.
All right, Pete, I got one more question for you, and we'll leave you alone for the evening. Deal?
Okay.
All right, so ask this question to all the guests. The mystery of rock and roll. There's no longer a mystery anymore. The internet, social media has taken that all away. You were a part of a mysterious band back in your early days.
Oh yeah.
But for you as the artist and the fan, what do you prefer? This new dawning of accessibility with social media? Because we didn't have the internet, we wouldn't be doing this with you right now. Or do you miss that?
No.
Or do you miss that mystique and that mystery of rock and roll?
Well, I kind of like it both ways, and I have a story how I got found out pertaining to that.
All right, let's hear it.
It's 1996 in the summer, and we're like 6 weeks in Europe playing festivals. So we're in Finland, and we're sound checking the day before because we're the headliners. Mm-hmm. And I see this one of the they have a staff of volunteers to help out, and I see one of them's out in the field really enjoying herself while we're sound checking. So she was backstage later and started talking to me, saw my laminate with my name on it, and immediately was, "Oh my God, you're Damien from Samhain." And then she ran to the nearest payphone and called this guy Mark Kennedy, who had a Misfits Central, a very early website.
Yes.
And then when I got home, I had piles of letters from people.
Mm.
Yeah, that was Tina Korhonen, and she lives in London now, but she was a student back then, and she would go back and forth from Finland to London. And she's a professional photographer at this point, and has had covers on Rolling Stone. So she's doing great. But anyway, she was the one that found me out.
Yeah.
And then I got a letter from the Mark Kennedy, and it was like, "Oh my God, we've been looking for you everywhere." Those Erie and Steve didn't know where you were. I'm like, I was 5 miles away from them.
Yeah.
But we never got together. So that's how it all started. And then I couldn't do the 99 Samhain reunion, so Todd Youth pretended to be me.
But back to the question, where's your preference at as the artist? Do you like this new age of accessibility, or do you miss the mystique and mystery of rock and roll?
I like it both ways. I like the accessibility to information and like things that I never knew. Yeah. I also, I'm a pretty private person, so I like being by myself and not being bothered, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you don't know who I am, then that's great too.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off? Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to discuss? That we
no, I think that's pretty much it.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, this is how things are going to work out when this is ready to go. Jeff, the editing wizard over here, will get everything all cleaned up, and we'll send the link to you. And if you could share it wherever you can, that would be fantastic.
Okay,
that'd be great. Thank you so much, and I'll be in touch with you in about 3 weeks with your episode. Sound good?
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Okay, great.
Thanks, man. We appreciate it.
All right.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
take from you, then